Hello, welcome to Speaking Opera. My name is Howard Hart, and I'll be your host today. My special guest is Octavio Roca. Octavio Roca has been a music and dance critic for the Washington Post, the Washington Times, and the San Francisco Chronicle, and a frequent contributor to Opera News, Dance Magazine, and Musical America. He is the author of Cuban Ballet and a book that we'll be discussing today, Scotto, More Than a Diva. Welcome, Octavio Roca.
Oh, Howard, so good to see you again. It's been too long.
So tell us, how did Scotto, More Than a Diva, come about?
Oh my God, that's a fun memory for me, actually. I was still at Georgetown in grad school in philosophy, but I was writing reviews for the Washington Post. And at that time, what I was writing wasn't about music, it was about ballet. I had sold the book to Athenaeum, a publisher back then, which is dead now, on Alicia Alonso, the great Cuban ballerina. I had gone to Cuba to work on this book. I came back totally blocked because of what I saw in Cuba, which you don't want to talk about right now. So there I was, blocked, which is a bad thing to be when you're a young writer and you haven't written anything. And then out of the blue, I got this call from New York from Renata's agent, because apparently they had had a big book on Pavarotti. And Renata was then Queen of the Met, as you know. And I got this phone call from Ernie Gilbert saying, Miss Scotto would like to meet you. Can you come to New York and talk to her? I said, yes, I think I can do that. And to make that long story short, the book was dropped in my lap. Doubleday agreed that I should write it. Scotto wanted me to write it. And there was my next book. I put aside the Alicia Alonso book. And in fact, I wouldn't go back to it for decades. I wanted to make sure the regime that's there wasn't there anymore, at the very least, that I was freer to write. But thanks to Renata, I got my mind out of Cuba. And I wrote one of the happiest books of my life. I mean, it's just a really all good experience working on the book. I went off to Gonzaga to talk to her and do all the interviews. That's, Lorenzo's hometown. And it was such a fun experience because Gonzaga is a basic little Italian town. You have your church, your hotel, your communist party. It was just surrealistic and wonderful. And then I came back and wrote the book. That's the story of that one. But I had the best time working on the book. I had the best time getting to know Renata. And then, of course, because of the book, watching her work on various roles, watching how she put together those roles, my respect for her as an artist. I mean, I felt so privileged I got to watch that backstage and to see how she put these roles together. And it was just one of the great experiences of my life, frankly.
He was a very controversial artist in many ways. I think given her early years in the soubrette roles and the lighter roles, moving on into the lyrico spinto and even eventually she sang Clytemnestra, and she really sang many roles. And I think that, how do you feel about that as far as her voyage or her journey in opera and performance?
I think unlike others, actually, she knew what she was doing. She knew her voice. I think she willed it into the size that it became. She was never going to be bigger than Nielsen. Come on. On the other hand, she wasn't Tebaldi. She wasn't Franny. She was her own diva, more than a diva, actually. So I think the way her transition to bigger roles and stronger roles, she was very careful always to sing them in the right house with the right blocking, frankly, knowing where to stand and never really betraying anything. Her Norma, which was very controversial, for example, I thought was amazing. And was it perfect? No, but neither was Callas. And the interesting thing about the way that she was put up as against Callas, once Callas was gone, actually, is silly because she was the closest thing to a Callas that we had. And that's it. I mean, I haven't seen one come around now. Let's not talk about Netrebko and her telebuntiness in acting. I think Renata was the real thing. She really was a sincere actress, and she could act. But she never let it get in the way of the singing, and she was a real singer. She knew how to control the legato, how to control the portamento. It was perfect. And she knew how to sing a role so it It really was what the composer would have wanted. And she knew how to read music, which, you can't say about all of them either. But I really do think she, more than anyone I've ever met in opera, and I've met a lot of singers, knew where she was going, and she knew how she wanted to get there. And that's what we're grateful she actually did, because frankly, she did sing an amazing variety of roles. And every single one of them was something unforgettable. You might have other favorites in those roles, but Renata was always one, oh my God, I hadn't thought of that. Or, oh my God, isn't that perfect? Isn't that nice? Yeah. It's just wonderful. I sound like a fan because I really was, and I am. But the truth is, when you come up with an artist like that, and that's in every field, in theater and ballet and opera, in movies for that matter, you may as well stick to your love because you know why it's there. And generally, it rewards you so many times, again and again and again, to enjoy that artistry and get so much out of that artistry. And that's what I got with Renata. I'm grateful to her.
I agree. We're on the same page.
Well, I know you are, yeah.
I truthfully, I'm, the years have passed and things have changed. And I interviewed Renata for radio, and I was on NYC, and it's actually on Speaking Opera on YouTube, the interview. And she talks about wanting to sing Carmen, which she had never met. Yeah, it's on the interview. It's in her, she's talking. But what comes back to me when I listen to it, and I will also say the same thing, if I may follow your lead, I am a total fan of Renata Scotto. She's sung so many performances that have literally touched me so deeply that I still remember them as if they were yesterday. And Norma, it's interesting how fickle the public is and can be cruel. Regina Resnick said, opera is a phenomenally difficult sport. Regina Resnick. And it is. It is. And she sang the Norma, and I was there opening night. It was very sad, very sad. But then a few months later, she sang in the Tritico. She was the first soprano at the Metropolitan to sing all three roles in the same night.
Yes.
In the Tritico. And the audiences went wild. They were all sold out. It was as if the Norma had never happened. And I remember being there. It was so long ago, 1981. Yeah. Just a few years ago, right? But I remember being there. I went to all of them. I went to all the Normas too, and they did get better. By the third Norma, she had worked out a lot of the issues that she had. And the audience was impossible on opening night. It was something I've never experienced that again, quite like that. But she had she was triumphant. She knew how to make things work. And I wish I had that kind of strength. If I may be narcissistic enough to say this, I wish if my life had that kind of strength, I probably would have had a better outcome. I don't know, but whatever she determined to do, she did. And I think for us who loved her as a soprano and as a woman, we can appreciate that.
Well, that Tritico, I mean, it was all amazing. It's one of those things that wasn't a lifetime experiences, but when in Il Tabarro in particular, which should not have been her role vocally, she comes on stage and you know exactly who that woman was just from the way she moved. You know how the drama is going to go. You know what this woman's possibilities are, what she can possibly do within those material conditions, to get a Marxist term about it. In other words, she knew who every character in Tritico was. And by the time we get to Miss Angelica, of course, is ecstatic. And I cannot imagine ever experiencing one better than that. And I would hope I get to see them that are close enough, because, the score will remain. It's always going to be there. We're going to see new people. But it's so good to have that example. And it's so good to have that memory. And it's a memory that I do have in my brain, in my ears, hearing her do those roles. It was just amazing. And, for a while, she really was the owner of so many roles. I mean, when you think of Manon Lescaut, Norma, Macbeth, that Tritico alone, Don Carlo, for God's sake, and all of them are a golden age that I think we should all acknowledge. It really was a golden age of the Met. because she did stay for personal reasons, family reasons. She stayed in New York more than she might have gone back to Europe or not. She wanted to take care of her children. And in New York, it really was those Levine years were something we could all look back on and go, oh my God, I don't care what else is going on in anybody's personal life. But in terms of music and drama, there were high points of the century, I think.
You bring back so many memories, Octavio. We're very fortunate to have, and Francesca de Rimini, which I loved so much. It was one of her great performances, but watching her and being fortunate, the one thing that is wonderful about Renata's career is so much of it has been documented. Strangely enough, Madame Butterfly, which is one of her great roles, was never videotaped. The
I know.
performance,
that is a crime. You know, that is such a crime. And the last one she did at the Met, which is like she brought back her production. I mean, with the basic cast party afterwards, but I mean, that was a crime that it wasn't preserved, because how
they should have done a video. There's probably one hidden somewhere we don't know about. Somebody probably has one.
I've looked, trust me.
The advantage we have, I think, of having so many videos is we have documentation of the greatness of her performances. I remember I guess we could talk about a lot of things now as time goes on, but I remember and I want to thank Bob Lombardo and his crew for those passes when I couldn't get in. Somehow I always get in, and I went to the last Men on Lescaut, and it was completely sold out. They had given away all of the free tickets. That the musicians got some free tickets, and the standing room was so packed that there were people beyond. People were like on the stairs, and they were coming. You have to move in, and it was packed. It was like they had let even extra people in. Beyond the people in the standing room. But I'll never forget those Men on Lescaut as long as I live. I mean, I don't think anyone's come anywhere near that. So
no, they haven't. And it's funny because back then also the Met used to tour, so a lot of people got to see her. Man on Lescaut and Tosca, but she tried. I remember one Trovatore at Wolf Trap in Virginia, and she spent the whole performance covering her neck because it was very windy. That was with Bergonzi, by the way. It was an amazing performance, but all I remember is Renata going like this, throughout the performance. At one time, she cooked pasta for everybody after Tosca at the Watergate, and she cooked for everybody because she got very, very thin. She just didn't eat. She ate very little. But good pasta with good olive oil doesn't get you fat. And I remember having just fun memories of. She knew it had been a good performance. She knew it was like fabulous, and there we all were in the kitchen at the Watergate eating and cooking with Renata. That was just wonderful. And she was going to do it again and do it again. Those tours with the Met, the country was better for it. It's a crime they don't do that anymore, because I mean, so many people, so many Americans got to be introduced to opera with the very best. Those tours.
Should friends be jealous of each other? When Renata was to sing Norma not Norma, I'm sorry. When Renata was to sing Tosca at the Met, something happened, I think with, I can't remember, there was a strike of some sort. So anyway, it was canceled. So she never sang Tosca at the Met. She did sing it in the park with the Met. However, she did sing it in Philadelphia. And I went to the first Tosca she sang in Philadelphia, and she cooked for us too. I was with Ernie Gilbert and she cooked, and he said, Renata's cooking. I said, what? And he said, come to the house. It actually was where I was staying. We were staying with friends. And she came to the house and she cooked the whole dinner for like 8 of us. She didn't want any help. She was in the kitchen. And I'll never forget those times ever. And Diaz was the Scarpia, and he was amazing. He was really fantastic. They were amazing. She was really something. And that has been, you can find that on audio, but not video, unfortunately. But she was amazing. So that was her first Tosca. The first Tosca performance in Philadelphia. She looked wonderful, and it was that period, Well,
she managed to look taller. I don't know how she did.
She wore the shoes. Remember the shoes?
Yes, she was not a tall person. She is, I mean, she's very much with us, but I mean, not a tall woman. It's all right. But you know, she looked tall.
Yeah.
I
She
remember,
sang tall.
no,
She sang tall, I think.
sang, okay,
I'm joking,
she sang
but I'm
tall.
not really actually. I mean, she had a persona. When Renata was on stage, you knew she was on stage. She was one of those singers that you saw her. Even when
Right.
she sang Musetta, oftentimes, especially in the Zeffirelli production, when they first did
Yeah,
the opening night, or the new production, or the production now that's been around for years, I should say.
yeah.
When she came out, she just stole with all those people on stage, you couldn't take your eyes off her.
I know. And there was Carreras and there was Stratas, there was everybody else. It didn't
Wonderful.
matter.
That was a
It didn't matter. But what we went to see Valkyrie together when they met on tour, that old ring,
mhm.
and it was James Morris.
Oh.
And she told me the role I'd like to sing is Wotan. And you know,
Should I be surprised? No.
actually, she liked the Wotan's farewell. You know, that's a really good role. It's like, yes, Renata, I know it is. No, don't touch it. One that was like that a lot, actually, Marilyn Horne, who also could have sung Wotan probably. She's another one, whatever she put her mind to, she did perfectly. And that was not as good an actress as Renata, but she was a great, great singer. And that was amazing. It's funny. I mean, there was some of these roles that, you know, especially the collaboration with Domingo were special. I do remember one thing about Francesca Rimini, though, one, because Domingo, God bless him, not a great actor, but a good actor. Francesca Rimini is the one that there's an arrow comes in to hit him.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw they did a close up on TV, which is unfortunate. He's like this, the arrow's over here, and he went like that. So, but Renata was perfect. She knew where she stands. She knew what to do with that performance. You know, it was nice. Yeah.
Those are magical days. Magical. We're so fortunate to have that on the video.
Well, what's interesting is, yeah, a lot of the way that the somebody shouted "Brava Calas" in the Luisa Miller performance. It was a broadcast, but there she has Cheryl Mills to get a hold of, and Cheryl was very kind and very supportive. So she actually got herself together and kept singing through, and it didn't matter.
She didn't miss a beat.
The riot that was in the opening at Norma, that was different, but she was alone on stage. Casa Diva is such a cruel entrance aria for any singer, and there she was all alone, people screaming. There was a lot of arrests that night, I think.
It was what?
Arrests that night.
Mm-hmm.
They actually rounded up
people. It was out of control. I've never ever in my all the years I've been to opera, I've been to a lot. I've never seen an audience so out of control. I almost wonder if some of it was, you know, organized ahead of time, because there was so much yelling and screaming.
I think it must have been.
Yeah, and poor Tatiana Troyanos was a nervous wreck. She was never known for having calm nerves to begin with.
I know.
Wonderful singer, great singer. But it's amazing that they even got through it. What amazed me about that Norma, and I say this in all due respect to Renata, is she got through it. She did not, like the Louisa Miller, she did not allow the audience to rule her in a cruel sort of way. And I'm sure it had to have been painful. I remember Negri, she almost never canceled Renata, and Negri sang the broadcast of that Norma, which was a very good call, because they would have been out again. So,
yeah, no, they would have been. It was unfortunate, and the truth is, it turns out to be one of her great roles in an unusual way. In Troyanos, she was not altogether there emotionally all the time, and that was very, tough on her, on everybody. But what can you do? Other things later, it's interesting. I mean, Macbeth, which I think was better in London than at the Met, but the Peter Hall production was really daring for its day. It reproduced the 19th century sensibility that Verdi might have recognized. But I'll never forget this one time I was backstage and I was at the Sitzprobe, and I witnessed a little fit that I was not planning on. I walk in innocently, and there's Renata in her wig. And she goes, "What do you think?" And oh, it looks really sweet. Wrong answer. You see, sweet. Lady Macbeth is not sweet. Rip, whack. And the wig maker. And it was like, oh my God, what have I started? No, it's true. She should not have been sweet, and that was not supposed to be sweet. Look, it wasn't. It was nicely done. That production changed a lot over the years. They brought it back. They took out the flying witches.
Yes.
They brought it back. They took out a few things. I think they should have just stuck by their guns, and do it.
It was a strange, it was such a strange production. And I remember the audience at the end, Renata got and Cheryl Milnes was fabulous. They both got wonderful applause at the end. But when Levine came out, he got some boos, probably because he allowed it to happen. But when Peter Hall came out, or I believe he was there for the opening night, but somebody who was involved with the direction. Not everyone loved it, but the flying witches and a lot of that went away, and they covered up. Remember the lady that was naked?
Yes.
It was in rehearsal, because Erica Miner actually did an interview with Speaking Opera, and she was a violinist in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, and she talks about that Macbeth and how, I remember that the rehearsal, the dancer with the electric lights in her hair, remember her? She was completely naked, and then they eventually covered her up. But the whole orchestra tried to look up, and Levine stopped the orchestra from playing. He said, all right, everybody get up and take a look and sit down again so we can continue. Because they were all trying to look at this woman who had no clothes on. But they did eventually get rid of some of the flying witches and the talking head. Remember the talking head up above?
Yes. Very good thing we didn't have holograms at that point. They would have had a hologram that Alonso lived in that musical. No, it's funny. I mean, the nakedness made me think of Carol Nebler and her Thais, which changed a lot in there where she sang it. Or the way Rosa Poncel in Baltimore Opera, because she was director of Baltimore Opera, and they would always get a standing ovation at the end because Rosa would come out. How could you not stand? But Tosca in Baltimore, they used Rosa's furniture.
They did.
Yeah, it was Scarpia's study was Rosa's living room, basically. Like, hey, you do what you can with your budget. It was very
so you get by.
Why not? Did you ever see Scotto's director?
Direction?
Yeah.
Or is it? No, actually, I didn't. Unfortunately, no.
She directed a Sonambula in Miami.
Uh-huh.
The soprano that was not at all like Scotto.
Mm-hmm.
And she was so good in directing her the way the soprano could sing it. And it was actually really amazing how she did know how to move groups. She did know how to make people on stage look their best.
Mm-hmm.
And this is with a singer and an actress that wasn't at all like Renata. And she made that production probably better than it could have been. It was just amazing to watch that. She's a very, very intelligent teacher. They were in master classes. You know who was like that too? Joan Sullivan, very, very intelligent in master classes.
Mm-hmm.
I think the great ones know what they're doing, and often they know how to communicate it. Just the ones who dabble aren't secure enough to tell. But in the case of Renata, she could have, if she wanted to, directed more. She clearly didn't want to. But she went very, very far. We should have talked about her marshalling.
We can. I just want to mention the direction. She just recently directed Anna Pirozzi, who's a wonderful singer in Italy. She's only sung at the Met once. They brought her for one performance of Macbeth. She was fabulous, really, really good. And she hasn't come back, but I follow her on Facebook and she does write back and forth. My Italian's not good, but I tried my best. But Renata directed a Tosca with Anna Pirozzi as Tosca. And it was recently, there were photographs of it. It was very nice. And it was done in, I believe, maybe Renata's hometown. It was in Italy, but I think it was there.
Savona?
I think it was. I might be mistaken. I will turn myself in later if I'm wrong, but I think it was Savona.
No, she's Lorenzo died, which is obviously a horrible, horrible experience. But she's moved back to Savona. And she is Ligurian after all. She's picked up the accent again, very northern. It's up up there. And I think she could, if she wants to do a lot of that there.
They
In some-
apparently was
they
very
should
successful.
have a statue to her. I think in Savona, she's the proudest daughter. I mean, they really should. Hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's director. No, the Rosa Cavalier was in Catania, which is strange. But we went. I think half of New York was there backstage. Cheryl Mills was there. He was the first to just walk into her dressing room with that napkin. Renata, open up. And he went, otherwise I will stay outside in the hallway. But I mean, it was such a sensitive, gorgeous Marshallin. I mean, really good attention to everything going on stage.
Mhm.
Little moments like when the word can is used in the way she raced away, like it was, you think Lotte Lehman was up there. I mean, it was just wonderful. And you and I talked about it a little bit. Coming back to the United States and asking people to really consider casting her and putting her in a production, you know, nobody would believe me at that point. Nobody would give her the chance. And she and Söderström, frankly, are the best I've ever seen as Marshallins. I mean, it's just that simple. It's a very difficult role, I think. But vocally, it's interesting. It's in the middle.
Yeah.
And she sang it perfectly. You know.
When I had heard her in as the Marshal in Spoleto in Charleston,
Yeah.
she managed it so well. And I was with a friend and he said, it'll be real interesting. He's a fan, but you know, not as much as I am, of course. And he said, it'd be interesting to see. I'd be silly, maybe not. We went and he said, she'll make it work, but I'm curious how she'll make it work. And he went, it's amazing. No one else could do it like that. It was like its own special way. She never avoided any of the notes. She knew exactly what to do, how to sing it. It was amazing. And it's interesting how many, I'm sorry.
No, she led the trio. I mean, no, she knew how to do that. But it's interesting. I mean, because then you complain about a few things. Was her accent perfect? German or Viennese German? I don't know. And some people do. I mean, there are people who complain about Birgit Nielsen's Brunhilde as a German wasn't right. It's like, really? I mean, sure, why not? You know, or Flaxer for that matter. You know, I can't tell a Norwegian accent in German. I can't. I really can't. I remember one time I was with a bunch of critics at the Schleswig-Holstein Festival in Germany. And somebody was complaining that Hans Hotter, of all people, sounded too middle class. He's like,
what does that mean?
I have no idea.
You think they did? Do you think they did? What does that mean?
Yeah, he sounds like a cobbler. You know, I don't know. But you know, in the days now, you know, now we're looking to get a production that looks like a production you're supposed to have. And when you sing it the proper way, you're just happy. It can happen anywhere too, in the big houses or little houses. The Met, which is a hard house to sing in, she managed to conquer it. I think it was by sheer will. You know, I mean, Covent Garden's smaller. Zurich, which is one of my favorite houses, is really small. You know, I mean, Jonas Kaufmann there sounds like, you know, a titan, which is wonderful, I think. But I mean, there's so few singers now that I personally travel to hear. There aren't that many. There used to be more. And Renata was the one for a while. But, you know, what can you do?
So I want to ask you, because I hope we can get you back again. But before we do that, I want to know what you're up to. What are you doing now?
Oh, I'm doing good stuff. I'm in the middle of a book, but there's nothing more boring than a writer telling you what he hasn't done yet. So I'll talk to you when I finish this thing. I mean, no, it's funny. It's interesting. I mean, I've only done nonfiction books. The Cuban Ballet one a few years ago. I did one on architecture. I've done stuff. And I always worked for newspapers most of my life. So I was a critic. So right now I'm writing my first novel. I'm an emerging young writer.
Why not?
So in a couple of, it's in the finish line. I'm seeing it. Once you hit the magic 70,000 word spot, you know, you're near the end. But the thing with a nonfiction book, and they know who you are really. You do an outline, you do a sample, they give you money. When you do fiction, like Toni Morrison, which I'm not, you have to finish the thing. So I'm just finishing the book and then I'll move on from there. And then I need a new agent because I need a literary agent who does fiction. And that's somebody else. So I'll be hitting every friend I have, say if I'm an agent, will be done. But it's exciting and scary. And I mean, when you're writing, it's very manic depressive. You go from what a masterpiece. Oh my God, I gotta throw it. What a masterpiece. I gotta throw this out. So today's a fun day, because I'm talking to you. And I'll be going to my writers club meeting tonight. And they're commenting on my stuff. It'll be good. But it's very near the end. And it's interesting. When they say, this is funny, when they say that characters talk to you, they do. I have one character. These are all made up. There's some real people in the book, like Fidel Castro and Alicia Alonso are in it. But there's one guy I call him Mikhail. And while I was swimming in the morning, because I was swimming every morning, do a little breaststroke and keep going. While I was in the pool, I decided I was going to send him to a concentration camp because Cuba had concentration camps for gays beginning in 1965, the UMAP camps. When I was in Cuba, I didn't know that, but I actually found out, everybody found out later. So anyway, it was thanks to the swimming pool that this poor guy ended up in a camp. And Alicia Alonso springs him out of the camp. And that's a character I'm having a good time building. The love of his life who did leave and went to Miami, New York, maybe San Francisco, is somebody else I made up. And I'm having a good time figuring out who these people are as I write them. But anyway, enough of that because it's not here. So when I have a book to give you out,
we'll do something for sure.
I'm having a good time though. I really am.
So I'm thinking as we're talking, and it's so wonderful. And when I'm in Washington, we will get together for sure. And Eileen Perez will be singing in the Rondine there. So I'm definitely coming down for that. But at some point, we're going to accelerate the amount of podcasts that we're putting out. And I'm going to do one on Renata that I would like you to have you join me with maybe a couple of other people, and we'll do like an ensemble kind of thing in a tribute. Well, I'm thinking to try to, and of course, Bob, if you'll do it. Bob and I see Bob. He's a wonderful man. I can never thank him enough. I would never, his generosity, and I was invited to everything. I always felt, and I attribute this also to Renata. She was always kind to me. When I first met her, she was singing, she was wearing a turban, a big wool, and a mink coat. And it was during the days of the Bohème when she was singing with Luciano in Bohème. When I moved to New York in the 70s. And I'll never forget this. I was sitting outside and I had gone backstage a few times and she knew I was a fan. And she said, "Oh no, you can't sit outside anymore. You come inside from now on." And Bob took care of it. And that's how I got my in. She was very kind to me. I have nothing, I can't say enough about Renata as a person. She is a wonderful, generous human being, and people who don't believe that don't know her because she is genuine.
Well, they're public images that people believe, and you probably shouldn't believe any of them, frankly. I mean, you really don't know. The way you don't know what makes a couple work, and you should never make a judgment of whatever happens to them. And showbiz couples, other couples, you don't know. We don't know. And it's probably none of our business, frankly, but you never know.
But taking things out of context, you're a writer, I'm not. I don't have that skill. I consider myself, I'm not a dinosaur, I'm a curator of opera. I don't consider myself a dinosaur. But people take things out of context. And I think with Renata, one thing that did happen was she would say or do something and they would take part of that and print it or put it on a video out of context with what went with it, the rest of the information. And so it created some backlash for her. And she also had a right to her own feelings.
No, she did. And I hope as time passes, people forget those two. Because the truth is, it also has to do with PR and how you let yourself be or not. In her case, she was very independent. And frankly, Lorenzo took a lot of the decisions also that should have been PR decisions. And she didn't need to be in the middle of the controversy, frankly. She could have done what Montserrat Caballé did in that same famous documentary. Also Montserrat said was, "Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Maria." And the thing is, I mean, seriously?
But we're not all wired the same way.
We're not wired the same way. Renata had to tell a story that she wanted to tell, which, by the way, is a completely true story. And it was taken wrong by the entire world.
Right. But it was out of context. And if you only see the second half, anyway, I'm going on too long on this probably. But I relate to that because I'm not always filtered. I can be unfiltered. Yeah. And even doing this, I'm careful, but every once in a while I'll say something and I think, no, leave it. Because first of all, why? Why start? Then it becomes artificial, you know, if you say, you know, because you can edit things out. But then I think, well, I did mean that. So, and then here at the studio, the guys, they're all much younger than I. They go, "Oh, Howard, get real, leave that in." Come on. What is that about? You know,
you should never say anything you don't want near a microphone.
Right.
It's that simple, you know. Stay away from social media.
Social media is dangerous.
I mean, I joined Facebook when my ballet book came out. It's called Cuban Ballet. It came out like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Anyway, I joined Facebook just for that book. And I actually get, you know, invitations to speak through Facebook. So why not? Now I have nothing until I have a book again. So I'm not, you know, but the minute I get a book sold, trust me, I'll be on.
We're waiting. We're waiting.
For talking about it. We'll see what happens. You know? Book signings are funny. But you know, I had a signing at the Kennedy Center with a line going around, but I had another signing in Miami where like 3 people showed up at a reading. It's like, oh God, 3 people. It's so depressing. You never know.
Life is strange. I'm going to take this advantage right now to mention my dear friend who's now with her maker, or wherever she is in the other dimension. She died many years ago, Erica Davidson, who was a very dear friend of mine. We were very close. And I'm going to, you're not going to see it because it's going to be shown in the film. I'm putting now on the screen the photo of you and Renata together at Doubleday at the presentation of the book.
That was an old-fashioned.
So people will see it. This is Erica Davidson's photo.
She was a beautiful woman. That was my first book. I mean, and it was Doubleday, which is nice, not chopped liver. And it was such a good experience just being there. I remember the store actually had a huge poster of the cover of the book. I made them put the accent on Plácido. I said, it's not a choice, it's a misspelling. You have to have an accent. Anyway, after that same week when the book came out, they actually gave me a huge poster. And I came back home to Washington with this thing on my shoulder on Amtrak. And I still have it. It was a poster of my first book. It was really wonderful. It was a beautiful experience. But Doubleday was a sad story in itself because Doubleday then, soon after that, was bought by BMG, Mean Germans. And it was the first of the big American houses to just be bought by somebody else. And my editor, Louise Gold, God bless her, she was one of those Mary McCarthy types who went directly from Vassar to Doubleday, an editor her whole life. And when BMG came in, they fired everybody in the building. There were no editors left of the old school. And that was the end of Doubleday. There is still a Doubleday. I wouldn't mind being in them, but it's not the same American publisher that it used to be. And that was the first domino to fall. There are so few independent publishing houses right now. And all the big American ones are owned by somebody else.
Yeah.
See, the BMG is Hachette, a couple of other ones, that's it. You think it's a publisher? No, they're all owned by like 4 of them, and that's it.
It's when we first met, I was selling for an import record company. Then I became an independent sales rep, and I ended up being around when it went to CD. So I was selling LPs and CDs, then DVDs. And so everything was like really great.
And
I just sold some lasers. I sold anything. So what happened was one day I woke up, surprise, Napster showed up. Remember Napster?
Oh my God.
All of the, and I was making good amount of money, and all of a sudden everything stopped, and Tower went out of business. I went bankrupt. I was like, how did this happen? I mean, I've since recovered, but not the way it was. I never thought that it would ever be like this. And the whole business went bye-bye. But I consider that a learning curve. For me, that was not, I wasn't giving up. I was like, I went back to school at 50 and studied psychology and studied addictions and did something else.
Why not?
Because why not? And now I'm doing what I really want to do. So
I'll never forget,
you can always do it.
an old friend of mine, I mean, really old, he died at the age of 100. Julian Green, an American who wrote in French. He was the only American in the Académie Française. Anyway, one of the last times I talked to him, he was in his late 90s. He said, Julian, what's up? He said, oh, I'm learning Norwegian. I said, why? He gave me the best answer I have ever heard. Because I don't know it yet. Which is the way to get old, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Howard, I love you and I love you still.
Thank you.
It's been
And
too
I
long.
love you too. This has really been fun, and it's brought back so many memories, so many memories.
Oh my God.
And I hope to have you back again, and I'll talk to Bob Lombardo and see if we can get him to join us, and we could do something maybe around Renata's birthday.
Would be nice.
You know, do a video. We can do it via Zoom. Also, when I do want to see you when I'm down in Washington.
So you have to, please. If I'm in town, I'm here. We travel too much, but I'm around a lot. I'm here all of August because I have to finish this book. As I told you, I already bought Covent Garden tickets and Paris Opera tickets and Toulouse Opera. It's all right. So there are more travels coming, but we should be in town more often. And again, please, let's not lose touch.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad you called me for this.
This is wonderful. Thank you, Octavio Roca, and we will get together again.
Yes, we will.
Ciao.
Ciao.
This is your host, Howard Hart. On July 31st, 2023, Octavio Roca and I recorded our podcast, Scotto, More Than a Diva, at WCAT Studios. During the editing period for the podcast, we learned of the passing of Renata Scotto on August 16th, 2023. We dedicate this podcast to the memory of our beloved Renata, who will live in our hearts forever.
Speaking Opera focuses on documenting the career activities of currently active singers, composers, musicians, and authors in the field of operatic performance and scholarship, and specialists in the field of audio recording, as well as those who have retired fully or partially from performing and/or teaching. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.